for joining us on The Skeptic Psychic, where we delve into ancient societies, ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, all looking at it from the perspective of the true believer and from the skeptic perspective. Joining me, my partner, my co-host, my sibling, Kimber Rodriguez. Myself, I am Richard Gregg. And again, let's look into being the skeptic psychic.
Good evening, and thank you once again. With all the children of the night, how wonderful this sounds. Greenfield, quickly!
Yes, Master. Yes, Master.
Well, welcome once again to the Skeptic Psychic. I'm sorry, I was just kind of getting a little bit of humor in that. I do apologize. With me tonight is the wonderful, exciting, talented, and highly intellectual, one of the most greatest people in the world, Kimber Rodriguez.
Gee, that's a kiss up.
Yeah.
Scared away a couple of people with your accent there.
Oh, are you sure?
Well, looking at the numbers, yeah. So what's new with you this week?
Oh, nothing much. I didn't know we scared anybody. I doubt very seriously we scared people.
Well, if you are watching us on YouTube, we ask that you like and subscribe and hit the notification to let us know, or I'm sorry, so that you can know when we have new videos up or when we go live. And if you're listening to a replay through Apple Podcasts or any other podcast, we ask that you please give us a rating and review us. And what kind of reviews do we like?
We like, for Apple Podcasts, a 5-star. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 stars.
Yes. We do prefer 5 stars, but we'll take whatever you give us. Sorry, words are not my friend tonight.
Hello, words. Be her friend. She's such a wonderful person. Trust me, I know.
Yes, I'm trying to get the words to work, but they're being annoying. So, any new information on your end as far as paranormal or anything else exciting?
Not saying much. I had a pretty bad week. Very depressing, very angry week, and it just came full head on a Thursday. So,
oh, I apologize for that. Yes, I also had kind of a bad week, so we apologize that we didn't get a chance to come on last week. But we're here now, and we have an exciting episode for you about vampires and how they love the blood. But I had an interesting experience that I don't know, maybe I'm sleepwalking or I don't know, but I got up one morning and I went to my kitchen and the entire sink was covered with the blue liquid. And so I picked up a cup and I smelled, and it smelled like the Lysol that I used to clean my toilet with.
Okay.
I'm like, that's really odd. Where did that come from? That wasn't there before. My husband's provider wouldn't have done something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And where she keeps the toilet cleaner, it's at the back of the cabinet underneath the sink. So I don't think Mercy went in and grabbed it and poured it out. So I'm not sure what happened there, but yeah, that was a very, very odd experience. I don't know where the toilet bowl cleaner came from all over my sink, but either I have been sleepwalking or I have a ghost that's playing pranks on us. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that it's pretty much an interesting topic on that. I still think something's going on in your house, no matter what.
I see.
I mean, with the history of one being at your two, 2 the stories that you've told, and 3 the experiences that we've both experienced there.
Yes. So I'm just glad that the ghost is just being a prankster and not trying anything to harm us in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But I digress. Let's get into the vampires.
Oh, interesting to note, I'm actually seeing us on YouTube and Twitch.
Interesting. And I see we're also on Facebook, so that's awesome.
All right, everybody, we're here.
Yes. Come say hi.
Hello. Is it us that we're looking for, or hello? You know.
Yes, come say hi, leave us a message, and let's jump into the topic of the vampire and how they evolve to suck your blood.
Yes.
Tell us about Dracula.
From Varney the Vampire, to Bram Stoker's Dracula, to the 2000 sparkly Edward Cullen. Vampire mythology has been part of our popular culture for quite a while. Even before popular books and films were shaping our ideas about these blood-sucking creatures of the night, vampiric lore was present in cultures from around the world.
Okay, wait a minute. Who's Barney the vampire?
Varney the Vampire?
Yes.
He's actually the before Bram Stoker's Dracula, there was a dime store horror series called Varney the Vampire.
Really?
Yeah, that. Nah, I could later on. I could actually show that to you, and maybe put it up onto the Facebook.
Yes, share that with our Facebook group so that we can check that out because I've never heard of that.
Yes, it's one of those penny dreadful stories.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to check that out. Definitely share that with the group. But continue. I interrupted you.
So, what do the vampires have to do with anatomy and physiology? It turns out that many of the traits and superstitions that we have associated with vampires come from actual diseases, as well as biological processes of corpses' decompositions. Today, we'll talk about 3 of these diseases: rabies, portiophily, and tuberculosis, and how they shape specific aspects of the vampire legends from Europe and North America.
I think that's supposed to be porphyria.
Porphyria.
Yes.
Okay.
So tell us about rabies.
Rabies. Yes, given that humans usually contract rabies from wild animals, one would expect rabies to be associated with werewolves rather than vampires. However, a 1998 paper in neurology by Juan Gomez Alonso
Yes.
Put forth a convincing series of arguments that put the symptoms of rabies front and center in many of the vampire tales. Also, in some versions of the vampiric folklore, vampires are what werewolves become after death. Ooh.
Really? I never heard that.
Dr. Gomez Alonso draws a clear parallel between the depiction of the vampire as a savage beast of prey, the erratic and potentially violent behavior of rabies-infected humans. In addition, both rabies and vampirisms are transmitted via bites or blood-to-blood contact. What's more, human deaths from rabies tend to result from suffocation or cardiorespiratory arrest. The bodies of the people who have died in these ways exhibit signs associated with vampirism. Notably, hemorrhaging gives the impression of the person has been drinking blood. And slower decompressions, making it look like the person was truly not dead. And let's not get into the whole point of the foaming mouths,
Yeah, but that's interesting because, I mean, if you think about it, if they start hemorrhaging, say they have like bloodshot eyes or blood coming out of the mouth, then they might say, oh, well, they've been drinking blood and that's why They're like that.
Right.
But I could never knew it could be associated for that. That is interesting. However, perhaps the most interesting point that Johnson makes about the connection between rabies and vampirism, citing Gomez Alonso, is that during a period when dramatic tales of vampires were first emerging from Eastern Europe, a major epidemic of rabies in dogs, wolves, and other wild animals was recorded at the same time. This was between 1721 and 1728.
1721 to 1728.
So everything was wanting to suck your blood at that time.
Yeah.
Whether you were a vampire or a werewolf, or, I mean, that could even explain why there were stories of werewolves at that time, if you think about it.
That is true.
But now we're going to go ahead and talk about porphyria. And basically, as rabies could be described as the aggressive behavior that vampires seem to have, especially with the transmission of the vampiric bite. Other key characteristics may have been inspired by a blood condition called porphyria. Note, this is not at all an old-timey disease. I'm sorry, I lost my place. I need to get back to it.
That's okay. We've never had it.
No, it is a very real medical condition that even affects people today. Before it was understood, though, people came up with supernatural explanations for its biological symptoms. There are 4 connections between porphyria and vampire folklore. First is that, of course, vampires drink blood. And this is because porphyria can result in brown urine. So this could have made people think that, you drink blood because there's red in your urine. That's obviously the blood that you drink. Also, Professor Michael Hefferson of Queen's University notes that before modern treatment, some physicians had recommended that these patients do drink blood to compensate for the defect in their red blood cells. However, this was recommended for that they drink animal blood, not human. However, this could also have fed many superstitions. I mean, just think about it. You're walking down the street, you see Bob over here. He's got a rat in his hand and he's drinking the blood out of him. What's the first thing you're going to think?
Hello, Bob. You seen any crucifix lately? No? Would you like to see one right now?
Also, if you're not interested in crucifixes, I do have holy water and garlic.
Yes. Now, vampires' famed sun aversion is likely connected to symptoms with the cutaneous porphyrism, such as PCT. People with cutaneous porphyrias usually need to avoid the sun because sun exposure is painful for them and can cause blistering, burning, even permanent skin damage. This symptom certainly would have seemed strange to people who've lived centuries ago. So it's unfortunately, but not terribly surprising, that these extreme sun sensitivity became associated with vampire mythology.
Yeah, they're allergic to the sun.
Yeah, man,
Right.
allergic. Lastly, the ideas that vampires have fangs and hate garlic, or that garlic will harm them, may also have their roots in the symptoms of polyphyria. Repeated attacks can result in facial disfigurement and cause the gums to recede, resulting in a fanged appearance. As for garlic, it has a high sulfur content, which makes it potentially attack triggers for people with acute forms of the disease. Now we get into tuberculosis, or TB. In the 19th century, Rhode Island was considered to be the vampire capital of America. Gee, that's maybe why
Really?
Taps is there.
That could be.
Yeah, between the late 1700s and the 1890s, vampiric superstitions were prevalent in New England, and so was the disease that people referred to as consumption. Today, we know it as tuberculosis or TB. Thankfully, TB is a rare in the United States as there are antibodies to treat and vaccine to protect against it.
However, it is still
However, these
around.
days there are certain medicines that are supposed to help the human body that, like, if you have TB, we surely caution you for not taking it.
Yes, there are actually still cases of TB today.
Hmm.
Thankfully, we do have, like you said, medications to help treat it. Um, however, in the late teen, in the late teen,
Late
in the
teens.
late teens,
Yeah.
in the late 1800s, it wouldn't have been too big of a stretch of the imagination to think that people who were dying of consumption were having the life literally sucked out of them by a supernatural creature. As people suffering from TB, they lose weight, become physically weak, have high fevers, and cough up blood.
Mm.
Yum.
Yes. Do you remember that movie with Clint Eastwood, The Honky Tonk Man?
Yes.
Well, character had TB.
I don't remember the character with TB in that. The only thing I remember with TB is in Tombstone.
Yeah. Well, in Honky Tonk Man, Clint Eastwood's character had TB.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
I
And
don't remember that part.
yeah, and in fact, also interesting to note, the that was Marty Rob. I mean, yeah, Marty Robbins' last movie appearance, and his song posthumously, "The Honky Tonk Man," which Clint Eastwood's character was supposed to be singing in the movie, was his last #1 hit.
Ah. Only thing I know of music with Honky Tonk Man is Dwight Yoakam.
No,
I'm a honky tonk man.
no, that wasn't it.
Ah. Yeah, I just remember in Tombstone, Val Kilmer's character
Doc Holliday.
Doc Holliday had TB.
Yes.
Yes. But in addition to coughing up blood in all of this, it does spread from person to person via the air. So when an infected person exhales, speaks, or coughs, another person can inhale the TB. Since most people at the time didn't know many diseases spread that way, there were hopeless villagers who believed that some of those who perished from consumption preyed upon the living. And this led to a series of disturbing incidents, of which the story of Mercy Brown in Exeter, Rhode Island is probably most famous. You see, Mercy, not to be confused with my husband, Mercy, mind you, but this is another Mercy that died of tuberculosis. And this was in 1892. In the weeks after her death, her brother Edwin began suffering the symptoms as well. Less than 2 months after Mercy died, the Exeter exhumed her body, as well as the body of her mother and sister, who had also died of TB. Because so many people in the family had died of the disease, the townspeople suspected a vampire was at work. And when they found Mercy's body to be more intact than those of her relatives, well, duh, they would have been married, buried for years. She was just recently died. One sec, hold that thought. Sorry about that.
No
As I was
problem.
saying, since she recently died, they were wondering why her body was less decomposed than her mother and her sister, who had died years before. And so they suspected that she must be a vampire. And they removed her heart and burned it. Then, get this, they fed the ashes to her brother Edwin, thinking that would cure him of the vampirism that was attacking him. Of course, it didn't work, and he died of the TB that he already had, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us about old Renfield.
Well, there is a mental illness, clinical vampirism, most commonly known as the Renfield syndrome. It is an obsession with drinking blood. Over 50,000 people are addicted to drinking blood and have appeared in the psychiatric literature from 1892 to 2010. The syndrome is named after R.M. Renfield, Dracula's human follower in the 1897 novel by Bram Stoker.
Yes, master. I'm
Which
coming, master.
Yes, which right now there is a movie called Renfield in theaters.
Have you seen it yet?
I have not seen it yet.
It's supposed to be available for streaming on Amazon, but I think you still have to pay for it.
Mm.
But I definitely want to see it.
Yes, the diagnosis of clinical vampirism is somewhat different from Renfield syndrome. Clinical vampirism is connected in an erotic obsession with blood. Renfield syndrome is more resembles an eating disorder and involving the consumption of blood and or living animals.
Ugh,
Yes,
disgusting.
yes. Now, Renfield syndrome, neither that or vampirism have ever been listed as a valid diagnosis. A case of vampirism uh, occurred in Turkey in 2012 and was discussed as disgusting behavior of a patient diagnosed with a dissociative identity disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder.
So I guess one of his option. I'm sorry. Let me take that back. One of his personalities was supposed to be a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
We also have somebody asking in Facebook about how Renfields and vampirism have never actually been listed as a, actual illness.
It's discussed in universities as it, but usually it's rare cases. You know, it's also we go into uh, talk about werewolves. There's also the mental disorder lycanthropy, which also can break down into Renfield's.
Yes, let us know if you want us to do a episode on werewolves at some time. I know we have a blog about that on our website, skepticpsychic.com. But if you'd like to see an actual episode, let us know in the comments and we can definitely put one of those together for you.
Yes.
Yes, but continue.
Continuing on to that is that a number of murderers have been performed seemingly vampiric rituals upon their victims. Serial killers Peter Gritten and Richard Triton Chase were both called vampires in the tabloids after they discovered drinking the blood of the people they murdered. Similarly, in 1932, an unsolved murder case in Stockholm, Sweden, was nicknamed the vampire murder due to the circumstances of the victim's death. Clinical vampirism is in the context of a criminal act of violence, as well as consensual vampirism as a social ritual, have been extensively documented as
Documented.
well. But they're
Yes.
dominantly documented.
Yes. Also, we don't have here, but there were also cases in the 90s and the early 2000s of murders committed by so-called vampires or having vampiric connections. I'm hoping to start a true crime podcast within the next couple of months, God willing. And
Mhm.
with that, I'd like to go ahead and also discuss some of those murders as well on our true crime case. Um, but vampire has figured in most folklore cultures from around the world. And the word itself is derived from the Russian word vampir or vampir. I'm not sure if anybody knows how to speak Russian. They can give us a um, uh, correct, uh, sorry, brain dead, can't think, a
That's
correct
okay.
pronunciation. Sorry. But
Exactly.
the PI in that word is a verb meaning to drink in Russian. Also, some say that the Greek word nosophoros, which means a plague carrier, evolved into the Slavic word nosferatu. And this is a word synonymous with vampires.
Do you have Nosferatu? Yes, we have Nosferatu. We have Nosferatu today. Hey.
Yes. Many cultures in ancient Mesopotamia have stories involving blood drinking demons. And the Persians were one of the first civilizations thought to have tales of such monsters. These creatures attempted to drink blood from men and are depicted on excavated pottery shards. Ah, I take it Tashelle is here. I see the Vulcan hands. If that is you, hello. However, there are also some vampiric cultures in Albany mythology as well. These are the Strigdra, spelled Shtriga, and also the Dhampir. Now, the Strigda is a vampiric witch in traditional Albanian folklore that sucks the blood of infants at night as they sleep. So this, yes, so this could be, possibly a
Skeeter.
no, not a skeeter. I was thinking more of a explanation for SIDS,
That's
infant death syndrome.
syndrome. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so that could definitely be a reason for that.
Yes, but
But
it does also say that they do fly off as like a moth or a bee or a fly.
that's true.
So I'm thinking mosquito.
There you go. Um, Only the Striga herself could cure those she strained. And this is also often pictured as a woman with a hateful stare and sometimes wearing a cape. Also, her face is horribly disfigured. Ah, that makes sense. Lilith was responsible for SIDS. There is a theory that Lilith was the first vampire, so that would make sense.
She's
Um,
also rumored to be the mother of all monsters.
yes, mother of all demons.
Hmm.
Yes. Now, the male version for Striga is Strigu. So you've got some that are women, some that are men. Um, there are several methods traditionally that are considered to be effective for defending oneself from this creature. You can make a cross from pig bones and put this at the entrance of a church on Easter Sunday. And this renders any of the creature unable to leave once they're inside. They could then be captured and killed at the threshold as they vainly attempt to pass. Now, my question is, how do you get them inside to trap them with the cross once they're in? How do you lure them in?
I don't know how they lure these people in, because I was looking at getting a little bit off topic, but I was seeing a little meme today that's had a vampire standing by the door, and uh, the tag balloon says, "Can I come in?" And the woman saying, "I don't know, can you?" And the bottom said, "And thus another vampire was thwarted by an English teacher."
Or by grammar, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you get them into the church somehow, and then you can kill them when they try to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Another way is that after they're drained, the blading, blah, 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 blah. Try that again.
Blah 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 blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Bad bitches.
Okay. Another way is that after draining the blood from a victim, the creature would generally go off into the woods to regurgitate it. Yum.
Yum.
Vomited blood.
Yes. It's better going up than back in again.
Oh my gosh. If a silver coin were to be soaked in the blood and wrapped in cloth, it would become an amulet that offers permanent protection from it. So, yeah, I want to run out, follow one of these creatures, take a coin, drop it in their vomit, and then pick it back up and keep it.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Bob, what's that stinks in your house?
Oh, it's that new coin I just got. Highly minted.
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay.
Ah. So, tell us about the Greeks.
The Greeks. The Greeks. Wonderful people, the Greeks. Because in Greek folklore, vampirism could occur throughout various means: being excommunicated, desecrating a religious holiday, committing a great crime, or dying alone. So, everybody, if you don't want to have vampire, make sure that you have your friends and family and loved ones around you. Because, the other causes include having a cat jump across one's grave, eating meat from a sheep killed by a wolf, and being coist.
Coist?
Coist.
Boy, I don't want to be coist.
Crosses and blessed bread from the church were used as wards in different places. To prevent vampires from rising from the dead, their hearts were pierced with iron nails while resting in their graves, or their bodies burned and ashes scattered. Because the church opposed burning people who had received the myron of Christendom in the baptism ritual, cremation was considered as a last resort.
So, best way to prevent people from becoming vampires is cremation.
Yes.
So, let's all just go get cremated. And, actually, what I want to do is I want to be cremated and I want to be. They have this thing where you can take your ashes and plant a tree with it. I kind of want to do that.
I want my whole body to be broken down and mulched into a garden.
So, you want us just to throw you in the chopper?
Yep. Put me in the chopper.
We'll put you in the chopper and then in the compost.
Yep.
All right. Continue on with the Slavics.
The Slavs have a lot of stories of the vampires. Romanian people immigrated into India, where Kali and Vutu were bloodthirsty creatures. Strigoi is said to have the ability to send out their souls at night to meet with other Strigolis to consume the blood of livestock and their neighbors. Similarly, dead Strigolis are described as reanimated corpses that also sucked blood and attacked their living family. Live Strigolis became revenants after their death, but there are also many other ways a person to become a vampire. A person born with a cow or an extra nipple. So we have to put that wonderful friend in the middle of a Chandler.
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg.
Could be a
tail
vampire.
or extra hair were doomed to become a vampire.
So if you're if you're a really hairy person, I would start shaving because people are going to think you're a vampire.
Maybe, because the same fate also applies to the seventh child in any family if all or his previous siblings were of the same sex, as well as someone born too early or someone whose mother had encountered a black cat crossing her path. Wait,
So in the case of Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, the youngest brother would have been a vampire.
yep,
Boy, that gives that movie a whole new meaning.
yes, it does.
I'll continue.
Because also that if a pregnant woman did not eat salt or was looked upon by a vampire or a witch, her child would also become a vampire. So too would a child born out of wedlock. Others who were at risk of becoming vampires were those who died an unnatural death or before they'd been baptized. Finally, a person with red hair and blue eyes were seen as potential strogoni. So, Romanian vampires were said to bite their victims over the heart or between the eyes, and sudden deaths could indicate the presence of a vampire. So that's also interesting, the fact that instead of biting on the neck, they have to bite them over the heart or between the eyes.
What I think is interesting, though, is the poor redheads. They never get any credit.
I know.
I mean, these are known as demons, vampires.
Right.
I mean, those poor redheads.
Weasleys, all of them. Weasleys.
Mm-hmm.
Graves that were often open 5 or 6 years after the burial, and the corpses were checked for vampires before being washed and buried.
Why wash them?
To get the stench off of them.
But you're just going to put them back in the ground. So
Yeah,
what's the point?
You got to get that stench off of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just put them back in the ground.
Yep.
Now, two of the earliest historical recordings of vampire activity in Europe can be found in the Neplatch's Chronicles, written back in 1360. For the year 1336, he mentions a shepherd named Mislata from Blove. Mislata died and was buried, but he didn't stay in the grave. Each evening he walked around, spoke to the people as if he was alive, and scared them. Soon he started killing. And if he was stopped by someone in the home and called their name, the person would die in 8 days. So this kind of sounds like The Ring, but instead of 7 days, it was 8 days. You just got to call, hey, Bob. Oh, Bob's done for.
Yep. It's like, oh, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, okay, let me write that down. All right. So you called just to say that I'm going to die in 8 days? Great. All right. So I'll get my things in order. Bye.
So the people of several villages decided to exhume him and burn his body. During this process, he let out a loud scream. As he was screaming, someone grabbed a stick and stabbed him with it, and blood came out of the wound, oozing. After he was burned, all of the evil events just stopped. Now, the second case happened in 1344. Neplatch writes about a woman from Levine who, after being buried, came back and killed several people and danced on their corpses.
Yay!
When she was exhumed and staked, blood started pouring out of her as if she was still alive. Now I want to know how long they were dead before they were exhumed, because there's still fluids in the body when you die.
Yeah.
So if you get staked and you've recently died, stuff's going to come out, people. Interesting to note, though, she had eaten her clothes as well.
Mmm, tasty.
Yes. And when the cloth was removed from her mouth, it was bloody as well. So I guess she was trying to get rid of the evidence by eating her clothes.
I guess so.
You never know. So after she was staked, she was still attacking villagers.
Mm-hmm.
And so they also decided to burn her as well. However,
Ever.
in this case, the wood would not catch fire. So what they did was they used a piece of the church's roof to start the fire. And with the holiness of the church, it caught flame and she was perished, to be
Mm-hmm.
seen no more. Now, in South Slavic folklore, so we're going on to Yugoslavia now,
Yep.
a vampire was believed to pass through several distinct stages in their development. The first 40 days were considered decisive for making of a vampire, as it started out as an invisible shadow, then gradually gained strength from the lifeblood of the living, forming a typically invisible, jelly like, boneless match. So I guess this is like the globular cubes from D&D.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, they eventually built up a human like body that was nearly identical to the one person that they had touched in life. Oh, I'm sorry, not touched in life, but the body that they had in life.
Yeah, they touched that life.
Yes. This development allowed the creature to ultimately leave its grave and begin a new life as a human. The vampire, who was usually male, was also very active in naughty ways,
Mm-hmm.
and they could even have children.
In naughty ways.
No, they basically, could go meet the widow of the person who died and create life with them,
But I'm saying in a lot of naughty ways.
or find a new wife.
In a lot of naughty ways.
They could become vampires themselves,
In a lot of naughty ways.
but could also have a special ability
In a
to
lot of
see
naughty ways.
to see and kill vampires, allowing them to become vampire hunters.
In a lot of naughty ways.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to stop saying that, shouldn't I?
Yes. Now, back to the Shelley says so naughty. Oh my gosh. Going back to the vampire hunters, this same talent was believed to be found in people born on a Saturday. Hey, wait a minute. I was born on a Saturday, so I could be a vampire hunter.
Yep.
Woohoo, let's go. In the Dalmatian region of Croatia, there is a female vampire called Mora or Morana who drinks the blood of men and also the recent dead who have not lived piously. They can be men or women who show themselves at crossroads, bridges, caves, graveyards, and frighten the locals by terrorizing their homes and drinking their blood. To be killed, a wooden stake must be thrust through them. In Croatia, Slovenia, and the Czech Republic, and Slovakia,
Slovakia. Yes.
there is a type of vampire known as a leech. And they are used to describe a vampire who has led an evil and sinful life as a human, and in turn has become a powerful and strong, cold-blooded killer.
Mm-hmm. Powerful.
Yes.
Cold-blooded killer. Now,
Mhm.
unnatural relations, especially between mother and son, is one ways in which a leech can be created. And it usually comes back to victimize its former family. who can only protect their homes by placing mashed garlic and wine at the windows and thresholds to keep it from entering.
Yeah, they get drunk on the wine, so then they pass out and can't enter.
Yes, but you notice the fact that it said unnatural relationship, especially between a mother and son,
Yes.
is one of the ways a leech can be created. So
Yes.
just let's leave that right there because it can only be killed by fire while awake and by using the right of exorcism is found in its grave during the day. Now, Bulgaria during the Middle Ages through the beginning of the 20th century, it was a common practice to pin corpses through the heart with an iron stake to prevent their return as a vampire. Now, again, you're doing it right. I'm going to make sure that Bob doesn't come back, so I'm going to pin him with a stake right there.
Poor Bob. He's
Poor
just
Bob.
getting it a lot
Yeah,
tonight.
because
I feel for Bob.
I know. I mean, in the early 1700s in Hungary, the Balkans, Poland, Bulgaria, Moravania, and Bohemia, which is now known as the Czech Republic, suffered a vampire epidemic. The United States reported many outbreaks in New England, especially in the 1854, 1888, and in 1890. The loup-garou is an example of how vampire belief can be result in a combination of the beliefs. Here, a mixture of French, African voodoo, or voodoo. The term loup-garou comes from the French loup-garou, meaning werewolf. However,
Dead wolf. Dead castle.
castle. However, the stories of the loup-garou are widespread through the Caribbean islands and Louisiana, United States. During the, uh, the late 18th to 19th centuries, there was a widespread belief that vampires in parts of New England, particularly Rhode Island, again, Taps boys, are you good investigating this? And eastern Connecticut. Connecticut. There are many documented cases of families being disinherited loved ones and removing their hearts in the belief that the deceased was a vampire who was responsible for the sickness and death in the family. Although the term vampire was never actually used to describe the deceased, the deadly disease tuberculosis or consumption, as it was known at the time, was to believed to be caused by the nightly visitations on the part of a deceased family member who had died of the consumption themselves.
Now, the Malaysian vampire may be either a beautiful old or young woman who obtained her beauty through the act of using black magic or other unnatural means. This is most commonly described in local folklore to be dark or demonic in nature. She is able to detach her fanged head and it flies around in the night looking for blood. Typically, she feeds off pregnant women. Malaysians would hang thistle around the doors and windows at night, hoping the vampire would not enter for fear of catching its intestines on the thorns.
Ooh.
So, yeah, when it takes its head off, like the guts go with it. It's just like this, like intestinal tentacles with it. Yeah, it's
yeah.
gross.
Cthulhu loves you too.
Yes, it is gross. Jiangshi, sometimes called Chinese vampires by Westerners, or corpses that usually reanimate during magical reasons. In ancient China, people always had the preference of being buried in their hometowns. And when a person dies in a land that is not their hometown, their family would hire a sorcerer to bring back the deceased family member. The family commissioned the sorcerer in the village to travel to the place where the person died, locate their corpse, and write a spell and stick it upon the corpse's face, in which the spell paper contained their name, birth date, and some other words that were used to reanimate the corpse. So now we're getting into zombies. Once the paper was stuck on its face, the newly created Jiangshi, or I guess it would be a zombie,
Hmm.
would, would then follow the sorcerer by hopping around. Then the sorcerer would lead it back to its hometown for its proper burial. This was often a last resort used by family members with no money to hire a cart to carry the corpse back. So I guess a sorcerer is cheaper than a cart.
I guess so.
I would think the sorcerer would charge more, but
Uh,
I guess that times were tight and
now,
they were.
now, of course, you're gonna have to explain the fact if you can't pay the sorcerer, what happens then?
That's a good question.
Yes.
Now, in case the sorcerer is not paid the agreed amount, he might rip off the spell paper from this Jiangshi. Once it is ripped off, it gains its own consciousness, and all of the power the sorcerer formerly had over it would be lost. So instead of being an obedient zombie, corpse, vampire, whatever you want to call it, that followed the sorcerer around, it would become rampant and dangerous. Once it
Oh,
was,
remember everybody, pay your sorceress.
or sorcerer,
Yes.
yes. Um, Once it was freed, the Jiangshi would begin killing living creatures to absorb their life force. Sorry, I lost my place again.
It's no
They are
problem.
said they are said to be created when a person's soul fails to leave the body. Some unusual features of the Chinese vampire include its long, curved nails. So you've seen those people that like to get their nails like really long, and these
Hmm.
days,
Yep.
those could be, watch out, people. Those could actually be vampires.
Hmm.
Um,
Chinese vampiric zombies.
yes. This could perhaps be derived from the appearance of growing fingernails on corpses due to the flesh recession. And its appearance of green, white, furry skin is derived from the fungus or mold that grows on corpses.
Because it could be the fungus among us.
Yes.
Now,
Satan, get thee behind me!
in 2017, mind you, news broke of an unusual Roman British skeleton from Stanwick, Northamptonshire. Buried face down, the corpse had a flat stone tightly rammed into its jaw.
Ouch.
Yes, Simon Mays, the historic England human skeletal biologist, said in an interview in The Guardian that the mutilations were thought to be unique. In the Romero, Britain, and that the fact that he's buried face down in a grave is considered by somebody whose behavior marked them out as odd or threatening within the community. Fear of such threats had resulted in many other deviant burials across Europe, in which corpses were efficiently scapegoated for a range of problems. Now, interesting to note with the corpse with the flat stone lightly rammed into its jaws, they said that the canines were very elongated. So, you know, uh, yeah, with the effectively scapegoated corpses were either from a fatal contagion to severe weather. These burials are vital in showing how history and archaeology can mutually inform one another. On one hand, archaeologists have shown how far back our fears of living dead goes. But on the other, explicit historical records can also offer possible explanations for the most baffling types of deviant burials, such as that of Stanwick. And the most well-known type of deviant burial is probably the classic staking of a vampiric corpse, usually associated with continental Europe. In 2012, Bulgarian archaeologists working near Shozopol found several century-old skeletons with iron rods in their chest. Meanwhile, Czech skeletons found weighing rocks on their chests, and Milkovice were thought to be around 5,000 years old. Elsewhere, we see depictions of decapitations, piercing of the heart, and other areas where nails and burials in swamps or bogs, while the vampires of folklore were often disinterred and mutilated after supposedly revenant attacks. Anyone already considered suspect in life could suffer deviant brutal on the first internment, and they are not uncommon. Folklorist Paul Barber has described numerous of Celtic sites from the Iron Age featuring deviant burials, and more recently, the dangerous dead of Britain and Ireland have been discussed by Mays, John Blair, and Matthew Beresford. What motivates these practices? Logic, often centered on the idea that the soul or some similar life force, the most commonly believed locations of the soul and the heart and the head. Hence the tendency for them to be pierced or weighted. Another motivation might just be the deceased simply had the bad luck to die sudden unnatural death through murder or an accident. There was a widely spread belief, still current among the educated of the time of the Shakespeare, that each individual has an allotted lifespan, meaning victims of a sudden death whose lives were cut short were more likely to return in some form after burial. Alternately, prone burials could have been a way of punishing the deceased by stopping their souls from leaving their mouth and ascending to the heaven. Whatever the belief involved, these burials remained as a basic and long-running motivation to be sure to stop the dead from rising again.
Now, deviant burials have been found in Britain from as late as the 11th century, and there are several detailed stories of 12th century British revenants who were disinterred and mutilated after alleged attacks. But many lesser known stories suggest that the practice has perished beyond not perished, but persisted beyond the Middle Ages and into the 20th century. Now, in Scotland, according to the novelist Nan Shepherd, Farquhar Shaw had troubled the neighbors so that when he was dead, they set 5 heavy stone kibbucks. These were cheese shaped racks. I'm sorry, not racks, but rocks. Not the rack, but the rock.
Face the rat, not the rock.
Yes, they were laid upon his flat tombstone. And this was, quote unquote, to keep him under. His grave in Rathymerchus estate is still enclosed beneath a metal cage or a mort safe to stop anyone removing the stones which were laid back in 1405. At Torryburn in Fife in 1704, the corpse of Lilas 80 was buried in the foreshore between the high and low water mark, with a heavy flat stone over it. Now, possibly, argues the historian Louise Yellman, this was because of her confession of witchcraft, and perhaps also she may have committed suicide whilst in prison. Foreshore is the area between civilized land and a waterway. Since witches could not cross water, putting water between the living and the witch was considered a safeguard. Now we move on to 1824 in February. Laborers digging a saw pit near Tintern Abbey found a skeleton that was buried face down in an orchard. An elderly local woman suspected this to be the remains of a man that was thought to have that he had been murdered after he mysteriously disappeared, quote unquote, he disappeared from his house about a century before. If the man's murderer feared that he would return, he would have been buried prone so that his corpse could dig itself deeper into the ground, rather than coming out of it. This is an intriguing twist on that logic that occurred in 1889 when, during an Edinburgh murder trial, the clothes of the murdered man were produced in court, but not his boots. It transpired that the local constable had been ordered to bury them on the shore between the high and low mark. Again, this was to prevent the dead man walking, a precaution which shows that murder victims could be feared by others beside their murderers. So I guess he can't walk without his boots?
Yep, these boots aren't made for walking. Or actually, they are. That's why they had to do it. Because one of these boots are going to walk all over you.
Yes.
Which puts a new meaning to Nancy Sinatra's song.
Right? So what happened in July of 1950?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because it was 1915, in fact. An officer saw two British soldiers burying a dead German face down. Officers eventually knew this was a particular precaution test, lest the dead man tried to escape, and also seemed to consider this general superstition among the ordinary soldiers. There have been many detailed stories from the 19th and early 20th century: Russia, Austria, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, which tell of people disinterring a corpse in order to combat storms, frost, or drought. In the case of drought, a corpse could have water poured on it or be thrown into the water, as the body of a Russian woman who died of intoxication in 1891. So you throw a drunk in the water, linking her death by the fluid which associated with the drought. Similarly, in Czechoslovakia in the year 1900, a summer drought was attributed to the fact that the village schoolmaster had been buried with a feather pillow beneath his head. This,
Oh.
the villagers held, needed to be removed to bring the rainfall. Although
So,
I'm sorry?
so by giving the schoolmaster a comfy burial so he could, sleep comfortably throughout eternity, they're like, oh no, now we have a drought. We must make him suffer. Let's take that pillow back. Come
Yeah,
on, people.
Yep. Now, although the drought is most common in these cases in floods, the folklorist Angus MacCurgee wrote in the 1926 Heavy Rains in Zarmeti, blamed on the supposedly vampiric corpse of a recently buried girl. One particular case of weather scapegoating from the Crimea reminds us of how general and forceful such beliefs could be in a rural society. When the prolonged drought of summer of 1905 was blamed on the supposed wizard buried that March, the villagers of Zavidio Kretia led a solemn torchlit proceedings to his grave one Sunday at midnight. To the dirge-like playing of fiddles and flutes, he was disinterred, so that the village priest could sprinkle some holy water before reburial. Unfortunately, Father Constantine, who was the priest, objected and rashly upbraided the villagers for their barbarity and superstition. As a result, he was thrown into the grave with the offending corpse and hurled on top of him. He was hauled out the following day but could not be revived. So he was scared to death. If not one or two especially pious women who had alerted the police, we should never perhaps have never known of this case at all.
Now, while it is impossible to settle on a definitive explanation, so many centuries after the event, the many extant and explicit cases of corpse mutilation and deviant burials found across the world do all tend to show that some treatment was considered to be for the good of the community as a whole,
As a whole,
for the greater good.
for the greater good.
Accordingly, the whole community usually supported it. Now, the legends, novels, and films that have inspired more than a few unstable people to go vampire over the years, consuming the blood and flesh of victims in vain hopes of achieving immortality in the world. But the real vampires, blood gorging, infectious, disease bearing ticks, mosquitoes, rats, and fleas, remain with us too, taking human blood and some blah blah blah, sometimes spreading death with a single bite. So sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs or other things bite. And now we're going to just take a quick moment to talk about vampires in the media. And the first we're going to talk about is one of my favorite shows, The Vampire Diaries. This is an American supernatural teen drama television series that was developed by Kevin Williams and Julie Plec, and is based on the book series by the same name written by L.J. Smith. The series premiered on the CW September 10th, 2009, and concluded March 10th, 2017. It aired 171 episodes over 8 seasons. This series is set in the fictional town of Mystic Falls, Virginia, which is a town that is charged with supernatural history. And it follows the life of Elena Gilbert, a teenage girl who has just lost both of her parents in a car crash. She falls in love with a 162-year-old vampire named Stefan Salvatore, who she thinks is just a normal human. Their relationship becomes increasingly complicated as Stefan's mysterious older brother Damon returns to Mystic Falls with a plan to bring back his past love, Catherine Pierce, who is Elena's doppelganger.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, The Vampire Diaries was a critically and commercial success, becoming one of CW's most popular series. It was praised for its strong female characters, complex love triangles, and suspenseful storylines. It also spawned a number of popular spin-offs, including the originals, which I highly recommend, and the legacies. Now tell me about my favorite show.
Why do I have to?
Oh, because we got to hear about Buffy. Everyone wants to hear about Buffy.
Well, to me, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a 1990 or 1989 movie about a high school cheerleader and her battle with a ancient giant vampire, which has a great Renphilic type character played by Paul Rubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman, and his death scene is considered to be one of the classic greatest death scenes in the world because he dies. He even dies throughout the credits.
Technically, that was in 1992, and it was created or written by the same author that created the TV show.
Yep.
Basically, he wanted it to be a certain
let
way.
me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish. The series itself, created by Josh Whedon, who also did the movie, premiered on March 10th, 1997 on the WB and concluded on May 20th, 2003 on UPN. The series narrative follows Buffy Summers, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, the latest in a line of young women known as vampire slayers, or simply stated slayers. Chosen by fate, Buffy fights evil forces such as vampires, demons, and other supernatural beings while trying to maintain a normal teenage life. She is aided by a group of friends, including Willow, which is played by Alison Harrigan, Xavier Harris, played by Nicholas Brendan, and Rupert Giles, Anthony Stewart Head. Later on, she had had several other of the allies that were once villains as well. Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show was a critical and commercial success, winning numerous awards, including Golden Globes, Peabody. It was praised for a strong female character, humor, and exploration of the complex social issues. The series has been credited with helping to popularize the genre of supernatural teen angst dramas, and has a long-lasting impression on popular cultures. Buffy is a must-watch for fans of the supernatural dramas, coming-age stories, and strong female characters. That is somebody else's opinion. It is well written and well acted, but it's not my cup of tea.
It is one of my favorite shows.
Right.
And as I wanted to say, when Josh Whedon wrote Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the movie, it was written in a way that was more like the show. Hollywood turned it into the campy, silly movie that it became. Now, even though that I loved the movie as well, he was so disappointed with the way they did the movie, he went back and he redid the show so he could do it the way he wanted it. And it is one of my favorite TV shows. I have friends who actually call me Buffy because of my obsession with the show.
Mm-hmm. I know, I've met them.
Not all of them.
No, I'm saying I've met some of them.
Yes. And now we talk about Interview with a Vampire. This was a 1994 Gothic horror film directed by Neil Jordan and based on Anne Rice's 1976 novel by the same name. It stars Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Kirsten Dunst, and Antonio Banderas. Film tells the story of Louis de Ponte du Lac, which was an 18th century Louisiana plantation owner who was turned into a vampire by Lestat de Lioncourt. Louis,
I actually should have had this one because I actually speak French. So
I know, but I wanted to I wanted to kind of even this out. So
Mhm.
I should have had Buffy because I love Buffy. And since you had to
Yes.
speak French, you should have had this.
Yes.
But anyway, Louis struggles with the existence as a vampire, and his relationship with Lestat is complicated by the arrival of Claudia, who is a young girl that Lestat turns into a vampire. It is a visually stunning film with a haunting and atmospheric score. Performances by Cruise, Pitt, and Dunst are all excellent, and the film's exploration of the themes of immortality, loss, and love is both thought-provoking and moving. If you are a fan of Gothic horror films, or if you're looking for a film that will make you think, Interview with a Vampire is definitely worth checking out. I also want to point out that they did recently make a series on Max, which used to be HBO Max.
Actually, it's on AMC.
Okay, I saw it on Max, but either way, it's based on the movie or the book.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard mixed reviews on it, so I don't know if it's any good. Really, I haven't seen it yet. But also, I want to talk about Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
This was a 1922 German expressionist horror film directed by F.W. Murnau and starred Max Schreck as Count Orlok, a vampire who preys on the wife, Greta Schroeder, of his estate agent, Gustav von Weigenheim, and brings the plague to their town. The film is a silent film and is considered to be one of the most influential horror films ever made. It was loosely based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it was made without Stoker's permission and therefore was considered to be a copyright infringement. Little trivia there.
Mhm.
Because of that, it was not commercially successful and was soon forgotten. However, in the 60s, it was rediscovered and since has been praised for its innovative use of expressionism, its atmospheric visuals, and its haunting performance by Max Schreck. Film is now considered to be a classic of German cinema and has been cited as an influence by many other horror films, including The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, The Shining, as well as Interview with a Vampire.
Now we get into the wrap on, wrap off, action packed vampire horror movies. Let's take a look at From Dusk Till Dawn. It's a 1996 action adventure horror film written and directed by Robert Rodriguez and starring George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, Harvey Keitel, Juliette Lewis, Ernest Liu, and Samuel Hayek. Let's also not forget, uh, the cameo by Cheech Marin,
Mm-hmm.
who plays three roles in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The film follows two criminals, Seth and Richie Gecko, Clooney and Tarantino, who take a family hostage and flee to Mexico. They find themselves trapped in a strip club populated by vampires. The film is a blend of action, horror, and comedy, as it definitely balances these elements to create a truly entertaining experience, says one critic. And the film is also beautifully shot with a dark, atmospheric visual style that perfectly complements the film's story and tone. If you're a fan of action, horror, or comedy, or cheese, or if you're just looking for a film that keeps you entertained from beginning to the end, then From Dusk Till Dawn, as well as its sequel, are very definitely worth checking out.
Yes, it's definitely one of our favorites, mine and Mercy's.
Right. And then we're going to talk about Wesley Snipes, who did a comic book character version basically called Blade. It's a 1998 film directed by Stephen Norrington. Blade himself is a half human, half vampire uh, who, uh, who hunts down vampires. The film was critically and commercially successful, grossing over $131 million worldwide. It spawned two sequels, Blade 2 and Blade Trinity, as well as a television series shortly lived called Blade the Series. Blade is set in a world where vampires have infiltrated human society, way different from the comic book version. Blade is a Dumphier, half human, half vampire, who was born when his mother was attacked by a vampire. Blade has superhuman strength, speed, and reflexes. He is immune to the most vampiric weakness. He uses his powers to hunt down and kill vampires, and he is determined to rid the world of them. It is a violent and action packed movie, also having a dark sense of humor. Uh, Wesley Snipes gives the charismatic performance as Blade, and supporting cast is also excellent, namely his trainer, played by Chris Christopherson.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I believe his name is Stick. He's a different Stick than in the comic book. The film's visual style is striking and with the ill use of shadows and darkness. Blade is a classic superhero film that both entertainment and thought provoking. If you like vampire hunter movies, you've got to check out uh, Blade, and you also have to check out the three modern Dracula movies: Dracula 2000 and Dracula 3000, and I think Dracula Generations as well. If you're into that sort of thing, there's also uh, the movie Vampires, which is James Wood plays a vampire hunter in modern day.
And then we can't forget my all-time favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what my all-time favorite vampire movie is?
Dead and loving it.
No.
Huh?
That's my favorite Mel Brooks movie. But my all-time favorite vampire movie, The Lost Boys.
Oh, okay. My sister's a vampire, a big freaking vampire.
Boy, you wait till mom finds
Check
out.
it out.
Yes. Can't forget The Lost Boys. One of my all-time favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
Corey and Corey. You know my obsession with Corey Haim.
And Corey Goldman.
It lives on to this day. May he rest in peace. Still love Corey Haim.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, that is my all-time favorite vampire movie.
All right. You know when you got no TV.
No MTV.
Yeah.
Yes. And Death by Stereo.
Yes.
Now we're going to talk a little bit
A
about the
super
game.
in the fridge. Don't touch it.
Now we're going to talk about vampires in video games. And we start out with Castlevania, which is one of Mercy's favorites. This was a video game series created and published by Konami. Series debuted in Japan September 26th of 1986 with Aku Maho Dracula, which meant Devil's Castle Dracula. And it was released for the Famicom. Series has since spawned numerous sequels, spin-offs, and adaptations. The games are typically side-scrolling platform games in which the player controls a vampire hunter as they battle their way through Dracula's castle. The games are known for their challenging difficulty, gothic atmosphere, and memorable characters. The series has been praised by critics and gamers alike and has won numerous awards, including Game of the Year from several publications. It has been a commercial success, selling over 175 million copies worldwide. It also spawned an American animated television series created by Warren Ellis for Netflix and premiered on July 7th, 2017. This series follows Trevor Belmont, a disgraced monster hunter, and he partners with Sypha Belnades, a Alucard, to fight Dracula and his army, which, interesting enough, Alucard is Dracula backwards.
Yes.
It has been praised for its animation, action, and writing. Also, it has been a commercial success with the fourth and final season becoming the most watched original series on Netflix its debut weekend. Did you ever play Castlevania?
Yes, I did. I played the first one.
Yes, I really enjoyed the one. I think it was on Nintendo 64.
Also, if we ever remember just ADHD talking, there was a cartoon series called Captain N and the Nintendo Heroes. And one of the heroes on that show was Simon Belmont.
I've never heard of that show.
Yes.
Interesting. Some other games, vampires, would be like Soul Calibur. I'm sorry, not Soul Calibur. There was Blood Rain.
Mm-hmm.
What was that one about? I think it was Soul Reaper. I think that's it. Where you were somebody who used to work under this other guy from this other game, and you break free. There was, I think it was called Soul Reaper, and then there was
Legacy of Kain.
Yeah. So
Was the sequel to yeah, it was Legacy of Kain, and the second one was
I know
yeah.
Mercy enjoyed Soul Reaper a lot.
Right.
So tell us about the RPG.
Well, you do have the RPGs of if you're really into it, there is I would say it's a very interesting RPGs, which more of people that play this play it as being how you call it. No, anyway, the game is called Vampire the Masquerade. Now, some people would say it's a tabletop role-playing game created by Mark Rain Hagen and released in 1991 by White Wolf Publishing. It's a gothic punk fictionalized version of the modern world where players assume the roles of vampires, who are also referred to as kindred, and deal with the right to the night struggles against their own bestial nature, vampire hunters, and each other. Now, the game is known for its asmer- uh, dark and almost asmeric setting. Its complex rules and focuses on storytelling. A lot of LARPers, which means live action role players, like playing the Masquerade. It has spawned video games, novels, comic books, and has been adapted to a live action television series which premiered July 7th, 2022, last year on Netflix.
I never heard of that. I have to
Yeah,
check that out.
the game is set where vampires exist alongside humans, but they must hide their true nature from the world. Vampires are immortal creatures who feed on blood. They're driven in their need for power. They're also divided into clans, each with their own unique abilities and weaknesses. Players in the game take on the role of a vampire who is struggling to survive in the world. They must learn to control their hunger for blood and navigate the complex politics of the vampiric world and avoid being hunted by the vampire hunters. This game, if you're looking for a dark and
Atmospheric.
atmospheric role playing experience, it's also a good choice for players who are interested in stories about vampires, as well as getting yourself immersed into the character. This
um,
would be a great one to play because there's also uh, different masquerade uh, settings, such as a whole book about the Eastern kindreds over in the say like Eastern Asia with Japanese, Chinese, and Oriental legends and lores that you could actually be one of those part of the kindreds as well. There's also in that masquerade world werewolves too. So, like I said, if you're looking for something that you can actually do LARP with it, or just wanting to get into a great scene for storytelling on, it's highly recommended.
Isn't there also like changelings or the fae?
Mm-hmm. There are changelings in the masquerade as well.
One that we forgot to mention also is True Blood, which I hated the show. I was very furious with the show, but that was based on a novel series by Charlene Harris. It was the Sookie Stockhouse novels.
Mm-hmm.
Loved the novels. My favorite novels to read are those. Was disappointed with the show because they killed off my favorite character and made her evil when she was, in the book she was aspiring to be an angel. So it
Mm-hmm.
really annoyed me that they made her evil and killed her off.
Yeah.
But definitely recommend reading if you love vampire stories. I definitely recommend reading the Sookie Stackhouse novels by Charmaine Harris.
Mm-hmm.
The show sucked unless you want a lot of gratuitous sex and violence. Then you can watch it. But other than that, I recommend read the books instead. But this does end our discussion on vampires. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And we do ask, do you believe vampires exist?
Maybe.
Do you think it's something that was made up to explain things that were not understood?
Yep.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and what you think. Also, let us know what your favorite vampire movie, book, series is in the comments. Your feedback does help us improve the show and helps us to make it more enjoyable for everyone. If you are listening to this podcast through Apple or other podcast providers, we do ask that you review us and rate us. The ratings and reviews do help other listeners find the show, and positive reviews can help the show rank higher in search results. We do review on air. I'm sorry, we read our reviews on air. So it is a way to get a shout out from us. And again, what type of rating do we like?
We like the 5 stars, boys and girls, and we don't want to discuss again the naughty bits.
We do like 5 stars, but we'll take whatever you give us. And if you'd like to share a story about, say, vampires, ghosts, UFOs, or anything you want to share with us, you can always send that in to our email at info@skepticpsychic.com. Also, if you have any ideas for future shows, you can let us know there as well. And make sure you join us next Sunday as we will be discussing an intriguing figure who many believed to have been immortal or a vampire himself.
Or even still around today, maybe. Maybe
Yes, we will be discussing the infamous Count Saint Germain. So be sure to tune in at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, 7:30 Mountain, and 6:30 Pacific. And we, again, thank you all for listening. Anything else you'd like to add before we end up the show?
not. Unpleasant nightmares.
Sweet dreams, everybody. Good night.
Good night.